Battle of Ditch, Khandaq. Though the Muslims were defeated in the Battle of Uhud, they regained their former position and even improved upon it the following months. The Quraysh could not reconcile themselves with the growing power of the Muslims in Medina. They found in the growing power of the Muslims a threat to their social and religious position, as well as their commercial prosperity. Hence, they wanted to decide their fate once for all. The neighboring Bedouins of Medina mainly depended upon looting and plundering for their livelihood. The Prophet did not like this way of life, and so he punished them on many occasions for their predatory acts. The Bedouins saw in the rise of Islam a great menace to their predatory habit. Hence they joined the Quraysh in a common cause against the Muslims. After the Battle of Uhud, the Jews of the Banu Nadir clan of Medina were expelled from the city for their treacherous acts and misconducts, and since then, the Nadirite Jews had been instigating the Quraysh and the Bedouins against the Muslims, though they actually did not take part in the siege of Medina. Events. In 627 A.D., the Quraysh, the Bedouins, and the Jews formed a confederacy and decided to attack Medina. They marched upon the city with a large force consisting of 10,000 men with 600 horses under the leadership of Abu Sufyan. When the Prophet was apprised of this danger, he organized his force and mustered about 3,000 men to meet the enemy. He decided by the advice of Salman al-Farisiya to dig a long ditch around the city. He also decided to evacuate the dwellings outside the town and send their women and children to towers and fortresses, which numbered by hundreds, in the city. The work was divided among the various parties. The Prophet himself took part in one of the parties to dig and execute the defense plan. When the Quraysh saw the new tactics of Muhammad, peace be upon him, they were simply astonished. A stratagem which was seen in the last European Great War had been discovered by the Prophet 1,400 years ago. They besieged Medina and tried to storm the town, but every time their attacks were repulsed by the Muslims. In the meantime, their food stocks had been exhausted, the season had also worsened, and a chill and terrific wind uprooted every tent in the camp. In the circumstances, Abu Sufyan raised the siege and decided to go home to Makkah. The Bedouins and the Qurayzite Jews who later joined the side of the Quraysh became disheartened, and thus the enterprise of the Confederates came to a fruitless end. Results. The Battle of Ditch proved a turning point in the history of Islam. The days of the offensive operations of the Quraysh were at last over, and much of their prestige was lost. It revealed the weakness of the military strength of the Quraysh. The success of the Muslims in the Battle of Ditch improved the position of the Prophet, who successfully defended Medina from the attacks of the enemy. The people of Medina now recognized the Prophet as the absolute ruler of the city. The victory of the Muslims over a greatly superior force produced a marvelous effect on the neighboring tribes who voluntarily became the allies of the Muslims. Henceforth, Islam began to spread rapidly among the neighboring tribes. After driving the enemy from the city, the Muslims determined to punish the Banu Qurayza, who joined the Makkans in their attack on Medina. The Jews appealed to the Prophet to have their fate decided by their own man. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh was appointed as the arbiter of their fate. According to his decision, 300 to 400 men were put to death, women and children sold into slavery, and the rest expelled into Syria, and the spoil was divided amongst the army. In the 6th year of the Hijrah, the Prophet granted to all Christians a charter which is a monument of enlightened tolerance. They were not to be unfairly taxed. No bishop was to be expelled from his monastery. No pilgrim was to be detained from the performance of pilgrimage. No Christian churches were to be pulled down for the building of mosques. Christian women married to Muslims were to enjoy their own religion. In case of the repair of churches, the Muslims were to help the Christians. Treaty of Hudaybiah. Long 6 years had elapsed. The Muslims had left Makkah for the sake of their religion, and since then, they had not the chance to perform the pilgrimage and even visit their own country. After the Battle of the Ditch, the Muslims became very eager to visit their hearths and homes. The Prophet realized the strong desire of their hearts and announced his decision to visit Makkah. In the 6th year of the Hijrah, 628 AD, he started for Makkah with 1,400 companions to perform the pilgrimage. It was the month of Dhul Qa'dah, when war was unlawful throughout Arabia, but the Quraysh did not want that Muhammad, peace be upon him, would enter into Makkah and perform the pilgrimage. So when they were informed of the approach of the Prophet, they came hurriedly to oppose his advancement. Thus, being opposed, the Prophet took a different route and halted at a place named Hudaybiah, 9 miles off from Makkah, and called a council of leading men to let them know his real intention. But the Quraysh were determined not to allow the Prophet and his followers to enter into Makkah. They informed the Prophet that he should go back that year, and in the following year he might come, when they would leave the city to him for 3 days. He then dispatched Uthman as messenger to inform the Qurayshite leaders that he had no other intention except the performance of pilgrimage. But they were still adamant in their determination. At that time, a rumor was afloat that Uthman was murdered by the Quraysh. This caused a great commotion in the Muslim camp. The Prophet sat under a tree and asked his followers to offer the oath of allegiance called Bayat Ridwan to him. All submitted to it, declaring their resolve to fight to the bitter end for the cause of Islam. Fortunately, Uthman came back after a few days. The Quraysh became afraid and at last agreed to come to terms with the Muslims. A treaty was concluded known as the Treaty of Hudaybiah between the Quraysh and the Prophet. It was decided in the treaty that war would be suspended for 10 years. Whoever wished to join Muhammad, peace be upon him, or enter into treaty with him, should have the liberty to do so, and likewise, those who wished to join the Quraysh or enter into treaty with them were quite at liberty to do so, if anybody went over to Muhammad, peace be upon him. Without the permission of his guardian, he should be sent back to his guardian, but should any of the followers of Muhammad, peace be upon him, return to the Quraysh, he should not be sent back. Muhammad, peace be upon him, should retire that year without entering the city. In the coming year, Muhammad, peace be upon him, might visit Makkah with his followers only for 3 days, during which the Quraysh should retire and leave the city to him and his followers. But they might not enter it with any weapons, save those of the travelers. The Treaty of Hudaybiah was a great victory for Islam. The terms in the treaty show the greatness of the Prophet and the superiority of his cause. Though the treaty seemed outwardly humiliating on the part of the Muslims, it gave Muhammad, peace be upon him, great advantages. His political status as an independent power was acknowledged by the treaty. Moreover, the 10 years' truce gave time and opportunity for Islam to expand and to force its claims upon the conviction of the Quraysh, while conquest, political, and spiritual might follow on every other side. As a result of this treaty, a great number of Muslims joined the faith of Muhammad, peace be upon him. Zari, the biographer of Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, "There was no man of sense or judgment among the idolaters who was not led thereby to join Islam. Great warriors like Khalid bin Walid and Amr bin Az embraced Islam after the Treaty of Hudaybiah." In this connection, Ibn Hisham says that at Hudaybiah, the Prophet had 1,400 followers with him, but 2 years later, in the attack on Makkah, he was followed by 10,000 Muslims. As the Prophet felt secure of his position, he dispatched embassies to the different rulers of Arabia to invite them to accept Islam, Many of the rulers came under the banner of Islam, but the king of Persia insulted the envoy. Another messenger, sent to a Christian prince of Damascus, was mercilessly murdered.